So we'll begin with some meditation this morning. Welcome, everyone. Find a comfortable position. We might consider the purpose of our meditation. And sometimes we just want to meditate in order to relax, to let go, to give ourselves a break. Sometimes we meditate because we have a commitment that we want to fulfill, meditating a certain amount of time each day, because we know that it helps us be more stable, more happy, more resilient. And maybe we meditate because it's good for our health, for our body. Or maybe we meditate because we know that that's the doorway to deeper understanding. Understanding of life and understanding of the Dhamma. So whatever it is, we can use the beginning of our meditation as an opportunity to set an intention. Just maybe we meditate for the benefit of all beings. We can think of meditation as having 4 stages, you might say, each time we practice. The first one being a kind of preparation, or how we come into meditation, how we approach it. And that can include setting an intention, but it also can include how we set up our environment before we meditate. Spending time before we sit down to meditate or start walking meditation to do things that are calming. Those cues like lighting candles or burning a little bit of incense or whatever it might be, chanting. I just noticed when I said the word chanting, my body just kind of relaxed. Even the word had a positive effect because of the conditioning. And then the second part, if we want to call it that, is knowing what technique we want to use. Observing the breath, following through the instructions of mindfulness of in and out breathing, which is much more than just following the breath. Or maybe it's using a mantra or whatever focus you want your attention to be placed on. Or maybe the technique is no technique. Or maybe we can think of a technique of just being present with silence. And if you've been using a technique for a long time and you haven't seen any results, it's time to change. Maybe seek some advice. Because the results show up in many ways, usually in our life more than in our meditation practice. But we should see some benefit. And then there's the meditation itself. In a minute, I'm going to stop talking so that we can actually do that. Allow the body and the mind to become tranquil, peaceful, enjoying the stillness. Even if there's noise around us outside, we go inside, turn inwards, and recognize that there is a silence behind the noise. To relax and alert, be alert and present. And now we gradually come to the end of the meditation. And whether we want it to end or we don't want it to end, at some point it comes to the end. And instead of just coming out of the meditation and launching into something else, we can actually have a kind of conclusion for it, reflecting on what we're grateful for, perhaps, or just really noticing the tone or the experience of meditation in this particular session. Sometimes at the conclusion of meditation, set an intention for the day or the night, whatever time we're practicing, and gradually allow the mind to open up back to the room or the world. And when we sit together, we can notice the connection that gets created when we practice together, and how beautiful that is. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Just notice what it does if you have experience or not with that chanting to start a Dhamma talk. Notice how that affects you. For me, it kind of sets up a certain sweet intention to hear the Dhamma. And I've been listening to people, talking about their lives and the things that they're going through, which I'm also always interested in knowing. And it's led me to reflect upon, what is it that causes us to thrive, or I'd say rise up when we're challenged, when there's something difficult happening, and what is it that causes us to go down, to get pulled into it, overwhelmed. So I think there are things we can do. Obviously, there are things we can do to prepare for those inevitable situations. And I really like this that the Buddha gave. Just noticing there's some feedback. Maybe that's been handled. Okay, thank you. there's a sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya in the Book of Fives. It's number 48, and it's called Situations. And I've talked about it before, but I'd like to refer to it because I think it has some fundamental clues in it about how we can prepare ourselves for inevitable challenges in life. And also, he draws this distinction between the untaught ordinary person and the noble disciple, which he does in many places in the suttas. And in particular, in this case, with regard to these 5 situations that none of us can avoid. And the first one he talks about is becoming old, getting old. And how do we approach that aging process in a way that we are not drawn down into it, but can use it to develop, to strengthen ourselves, to develop our good qualities. And I was thinking about the first kind of encounter I had in my life with old age, because we all encounter this. Even if we die relatively young, we've had relatives that have gotten old that we know. My first encounter with old age with my great-grandmother. It's my mother's grandmother, and my mother loved her grandmother. And my great-grandmother lived to be 98 almost, and I was in my mid-20s when she died. I already had both my children, and she saw them and knew them. And she had many children. She had 9 children, and many grandchildren, and many great-grandchildren, and then those great-great-grandchildren. But when I was little and we'd go to visit her, it was kind of, I don't know, I felt it was a little bit scary, the old age. And I'm so glad I had that chance to see old age happening and how I think she was a good example of how to be with it. And when the Buddha talks about these situations, he, as I said, talks about how basically how we get pulled down into sorrow and despair and how we rise above it. And the other situations he talks about are sickness, which we also, none of us can avoid, and death, which we certainly can't avoid, but we try really hard. Our society is puts in quite a lot of effort to hide death from any of us as much as possible. And then he talks about destruction of things. And he said anything subject to being destroyed can be destroyed. And the 5th one is anything that can be lost can get lost. So we lose things. We have things that are destroyed, homes and cars and you name it, relationships, all kinds of things. So what is this way in which the untaught ordinary person approaches these things that causes them to go down into despair and sorrow? And the Buddha said it, like really like being struck by a poisoned arrow. And he says it's because they don't think this doesn't just happen to me, it happens to everyone. But he said the noble disciple thinks, oh, this doesn't just happen to me, this happens to everyone. And the untaught ordinary person doesn't think, well, if I become overwhelmed by this or saddened by it, I'll lose my appetite, I won't be able to do my work, my friends will become sad, and my enemies will become happy. Those kinds of thoughts. I don't know, do you feel like that helps? For me, I think that, and he says the noble disciple doesn't think that way. They know that, yeah, this is not going to be good if I go deep into this sorrow. The same idea, knowing it'll make my friends sad and my enemies happy, knowing that I'll not be able to basically function in life. But the question is, does that help? Does that help us rise up? What really helps us? I know the way we think has an awful lot to do with it. A lot to do with it. When my uncle died, my mother's younger brother, who she loved dearly also, he was 48 and it was sudden, and she cried and cried. Later on, she said, I cried so much when he died that I think all my tears dried up. She couldn't cry anymore. And she said at the time, when she would kind of like have moments where she wasn't thinking about the fact that he was gone, she would feel guilty and think, I have to be thinking about this all the time, how horrible it is, how sad it is, how much I miss him. And that if she didn't think about it all the time, the guilt would come because she thought that meant she didn't love him or didn't care. And of course, I think she learned later that that's not what it means to think of other things and be engaged in other things in life. So the question is, how do we, it's not that the noble disciple doesn't care about the people we lose in our life, but what is that? What are the causes? What are the conditions that bring us to acceptance, to a deepening in wisdom that causes these particular situations in life to be heavenly messengers, to really bring wisdom? And so it is a lot around how we reflect on the situation. Again, we're not the only ones. When we step back and we really look at the big picture, the big picture of how generations come and go, how life changes, and it has to change. It can't stay still. And then what happens after you die? I feel like my father's death, as many of you know, was the real impetus for me to understand the Dhamma. I didn't even know about Dhamma then, but to understand the Dhamma, regardless of what we call it. What happens after we die? And of course, the Buddha talked about this again and again and again, about rebirth, about the devas that would come to him after someone would die, and then they'd appear to him as a deva. I mean, I know people who have had this experience. I know a woman who's father just appeared in her kitchen after he died. She talked to him. Now, if we're what do I want to say, very materialistic, if we're really deeply committed to only believing what we see ourselves, which is good. See, that's not how I want to say it, I guess. That it's only materiality that we value or acknowledge, then we might just think this is a kind of a hallucination, or it doesn't really relate to the being that just left their body. But there are many people who experience these kinds of things and recognize that there really is a chitta or consciousness that leaves the body when the body dies, and it goes on to something else. And the Buddha, of course, like I said, talked about this a lot. And if you don't have an experience like that, and you really don't maybe remember any of those transitions yourself, or haven't had the experience, or know someone you really trust who talks about having such an experience, then we may feel shut off from that otherworldly reality. And my usual advice in those cases is to not reject the possibility, to stay open, and even look for the evidence. I was really wanting to understand. And so meditation became the doorway into that. That's one of the reasons we meditate, because our consciousness is altered. The state of our mind can be altered to open up to what's beyond this material world and to really understand it. And of course, this is what the Buddha talked about from the night of his enlightenment. He saw his own past lives. He saw the coming and going of other people. He said it was like standing at the end of a hallway with a bunch of doors on each side, and you'd see someone pass away on one side of the hallway, come in the door into the hallway, and go out another door into another lifetime. He said it was that clear. And he could see the things that the person was doing in that previous lifetime and how it affected what was happening in the next lifetime. And I think if we reflect on some of the changes in our own life, like, did you have a period in your life where you lived in one area and then you moved to another? And you had to start over, and you had, you make new friends, and you figure out, where the grocery store is that you want to shop at, and how to get your utilities turned on, and all of those things that you have to do when you move. And it's kind of like leaving one whole context of life and going to another one. And it's like that. And when we think like that, we're not as likely to go down into despair when someone we love passes away. And we're not as likely to be worried about passing away ourselves, because it's not the end of the story. And it might seem kind of, I don't know, trivial or superficial to hear someone say, well, if the end of the story isn't a good ending, it's not the end. But actually, I think it's true. Because what is the end? What is the end of this long saga? It's awakening, where that consciousness comes to peace, complete peace. And I imagine that you're listening to this or you're here because you already know that's possible. And that there are people who experience that in this very life. And hopefully you know that that's available to you too. And some of the same tools or qualities that help us to rise up when we're faced with these challenging situations that no one can avoid also bring us to awakening. The way we see our situation, the way we think about it, the way we reflect upon it, that we meditate, that we live our lives as virtuously as possible, that we develop faith, faith in the Dhamma, faith in the Buddha. Actually, we only really need to develop faith in the Dhamma, because automatically with that, we'll have faith in the Buddha and the Sangha, the enlightened Sangha. The fact that there are people who have gained enlightenment, if you want to call it that, realized the truth. So last year we had the Upasika program. Some of you were involved in that. Next year we expect to have it again, and we hope that you'll join in. And we focused on 5 qualities that are often talked about together in the suttas. It was faith, generosity, virtue, learning, and wisdom. Now, that's not one of the lists in the 37 wings of awakening, like factors or powers or enlightenment factors and like that. It's just a list that the Buddha used frequently, talking about how we develop, particularly in lay life, but it's also true for monastic life. Developing faith, generosity, virtue, learning, and wisdom. And one of the things that I found interesting was at the end of the year, so those of you who did the program, you know, we spent 2 months on each of those qualities, really trying to deepen those particular qualities. And at the end of the year, one of the questions we asked was, which of those 5 were, really potent for you or stood out the most? And I was really amazed to hear that a very large percentage of people, much more than half, I think, said it was the quality of faith that was really impactful, the most impactful. And I suspect, it's just my thought, that maybe that's because faith is the factor that is, I think, very much, I was going to say downplayed in our society, but that's not really quite it. I think many of us have been in contact with faith based on just accepting a philosophy and maybe pressured in that way, and we're very allergic to it. And actually the Buddha was, don't do that. Don't just accept things based on being told that that's how it works. Because, as human beings, when we hear something over and over and over again, our mind begins to believe it. even without any real evidence. And then you can say, but how do I find evidence of what happens after you die? Yeah, it's looking at the subtleties of what comes through meditation, what comes through observation, what comes through feeling. And that development of faith, we used chanting, really looking at some of the suttas. And it's a tuning in to that sensitivity that we have inside. We come to it internally, not externally. So instead of it just being something that we hear over and over again, it's something we feel and know directly inside of us. That's where we discover it. That's why meditation is so important. And another huge factor in how we rise up in challenges instead of go down into despair is community, is having each other to remind each other. And that's our teachers, and it's our fellow practitioners, and it's even the people in our life that are doing the opposite thing, aren't on the path at all. We can recognize, even learn from them. And many people who would think they're not on the path at all still have this understanding in them about something beyond this world. So it's not like just putting people, the untaught ordinary disciple, not just putting people in that category because they don't, study the Dhamma in, some quote Buddhist context. Those demarcations are all made up anyway. But to recognize that people have faith without any religion. And having this this attitude towards life where we can learn from everything, including the things that are unskillful and unwholesome. It's what do we do with it that counts. Everybody, as far as I can tell, goes through rough patches where we forget, and we need that reminding. We need to really help each other. And this program, how do I apply the Dhamma to this, as most of you know, started with the pandemic. It felt like we were all struggling how to deal with this very mysterious disease that we didn't know how to guard against at all in the beginning. And what came out of it was a real sense of community, more than we ever had before. So it's another way to look at these circumstances of old age, sickness, death, destruction, loss, is that there's always something that is good that comes out of it. I've never heard of any situation where there isn't something good that comes out of it, because it's inherent in the way the world works. That when there's a lot of dark, there's a light in there that comes through. When there's a lot of light, there's something dark in there that comes through. It's constantly changing. can never just stay on one side. But for us, we get to have some amount of ability to choose where we put our attention, to choose what we develop. And we need to remember that. When we start feeling our mind going down into that sorrow, that remorse, regret, that suffering that gets piled on top of whatever circumstance we're experiencing, to make a choice, to step back, to look at the bigger picture, to notice the people who are in much deeper trouble than we are, and maybe we can help, to really see that this goes in cycles, and we can learn from each part of the cycle to understand better the Dhamma, to get really prepare ourselves for that happy ending of complete peace and freedom from suffering. I think that's where I'll leave it for now. So, do you have examples you'd like to talk about, share, or explore? Questions, comments? Kimberly?
Thank you so much, Ayya. What a beautiful, beautiful Dhamma talk today. I so enjoyed it, and I can share a really beautiful experience of death with the group if you'd like.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
So when I was a very little girl, I watched the movie The Dark Crystal. It's a Jim Henson movie. It's Muppets, and there are these beautiful creatures called the Uru, and they're very monkish. And the protagonist of the story, Jen, he's raised by these beautiful monkish beings. And when his master dies, and I was 8 when I watched this movie, it became my spiritual awakening. And when his master died, it's so funny, but when his master dies, all of the other Urus turn, look at the sky, as if just like acknowledging, and then slowly just return to life. And there's no mourning and no sadness. It just is. And I remember that hitting me really hard as a child. Wow, their master just died. They're all so interconnected, and they're just moving on.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I was in my very early 30s, my grandfather died. And my mother called me and said, "Your grandfather's dying." His kidneys are failing. You should come. And I just was like, I'm supposed to be there. I absolutely know this. And I went to the hospital, and the first thing I did was crawl into bed with my grandfather in front of all of his living relatives, his sister, one of his brothers, his children, my aunts, my uncle. And I just started stroking his face, and I said, Papa, it's Kimberly, your eldest grandchild. And on my way here, I was thinking about when you would drive the tractor and pull the hay wagon, and Kelly and I would be in the hay wagon, and we would play, and we would ride with you on the tractor. And his face visibly changed, and he was,
Yeah.
And I heard a nurse say, finally, someone who knows how to deal with death.
Mm. Wow.
And again, that really struck me. I was like, oh, I'm a person who knows how to deal with death. That's interesting. Why do these other people not know how to deal with death? Or is it special that I got into bed with him? Anyway, as he progressed, I stayed with him the entire time with my aunt and my mother, and we made this triangle. And I began to be able to hear everything he needed.
Wow.
When he needed his mouth wetted, when he needed his adult diaper changed, when, like, everything. We sang to him, we massaged him. And then at about 1:15 in the morning, something grabbed me by the top of my head like I was a puppet and yanked me out of my seat and stood me up, and in a voice that was not my own and it was not me, said, "Daughters, kiss your father, he's about to die." And so we all went to his head and we started stroking him and kissing him. And his eyes opened, and I saw the light go right out of them.
Mm.
Like a candle was being blown out. And I thought, oh my God, this is so beautiful. I wish this kind of death for everyone, to be sung to be touched, to be kissed, to be held. This is how I want to die. And this was a sacred contract between my grandfather and I. I really believe that part of my coming into this world was to help my grandfather die, like to be witness to that so that I could know that it could be really, really beautiful. I no longer fear death, you know, I don't. It was really special.
Thank you, Kimberly.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, with an experience like that, it's just not lights out at the end.
That's right. And I didn't cry. It was like, like watching the Dark Crystal all over again. It was just like, oh, this is just how it is.
Mhm. Yeah.
I don't need to cry. There was nothing to mourn. It was so beautiful. He'd lived a long life. It was wonderful.
Yeah, you're reminding me of, I've said this before to all of you probably, but I just, when I was with my mom in those last months, especially those last weeks, it just very much felt like we were waiting for the miracle of death. It's a miracle. This living being comes into this body. That's a miracle when we're born, and when we die and that goes out of the body again, that's another miracle. Goes on. And we've all lost people. But I had a very strong feeling that we're still not separate. When you go deeper into the Dhamma and you start to really experience that, in Nibbana, with Nibbana, there's no separation. There's no me and other. There's no self. There's no self. It's not an eternal existence because there's no time. Our thinking mind can't really wrap itself around timelessness. But the Dhamma is timeless. Nibbana is timeless. Now, the people that have left us, the people who have passed away, they are most likely, maybe, I don't know, continuing in another lifetime, doing it again, learning more, you might say. But then in the ending, the happy ending, really is complete peace beyond time. So yeah, it's I think it's really important to be able to at least open ourselves up to the possibility for those who really feel like they can't see beyond the wall of death. Although if you're in that situation like Kimberly just described, it feels to me like that isn't a wall, it's a veil, and it becomes very thin at times like that, to where you really can get that sense of what's beyond it. There are other times like that too, as practitioners, becoming sensitive to intuition, what really can arise within us. Or when, like the Buddha on the night of his enlightenment, when he had the knowledge and vision of things not known before, or any of us that we experience, we have insights that come. What is showing us that? How does that happen? And we don't have to have an answer. We just need to open up to it. Let ourselves experience it. And if we are sad, that's not a problem. That's normal. It's natural. Feel that. Be present with it. So one of the big keys to not going down into despair is mindfulness. That we're present with what we experience rather than being caught in it. And even if we get caught in it and we come out again and we see it, and then keep strengthening that ability to observe rather than be attached, to let go. Let go of despair, let go of sadness, let go of the poisoned arrow. We don't have to go down, even when it's hard. I think I need to watch that movie. Sounds like a good community KBV movie night movie.
It has David Bowie.
It has David Bowie, I hear.
Now that's the labyrinth. Do not get confused between the dark crystal and the labyrinth.
Okay.
Right.
I'm glad for that. I'm totally clueless about all of it, but all right. Anybody else want to share anything? And having doubts and questions about this are also valuable, and it's good to acknowledge them if they're there. And if we have doubts, then it's good to inquire inside, inquire from people we trust. You're also welcome to change the subject if you like. there's anything you'd like to talk about, feel free. The Pasika program. Yeah, I mean, I think the way the Pasika program is probably going to work is similar to last time. We'll have an application process, and we haven't really formed it yet, so I'm not entirely sure. We'll pick a theme. It might be the same qualities or it might be something different. And we'll have regular meetings. There will be the framework will be the same as last time. So a commitment to keeping the 5 precepts throughout the year, the commitment to observing the Uposatha days, the full moon and new moon. Doesn't have to be exactly on that day. The question here is, what does Upasika mean? Upasika is a disciple, a committed disciple of the Buddha, one who wants to put in, go deeper and draw nearer to the Dhamma. And, the Buddha, at the time of the Buddha, he would call those the white-clothed lay people. So it's the position. So in the Buddha's sasana, or the Buddha's dispensation, you might say, everything was divided by gender. But if we ignore that for the minute, you have those who live the monastic life and those who continue as lay disciples, and upasikas are lay disciples. So it's a deepening of the practice and a deepening of our maturing in the Dhamma. And so it's more intensive, and there are commitments involved. People will have a buddy that they work with throughout the year, and part of the fundamental agreements is to do a kind of confession, and it's an acknowledgement of the things that didn't go so well and the things that also went well in the last couple weeks. And then every couple of weeks you talk to your confession buddy about things. Those are really supporting each other. The person you have confession with isn't necessarily your buddy in the program, because confession is a very personal thing. You might want that to be someone else in your life, which is fine. I think if you really want to, you can take a look at the Upasika program materials and agreements, and all of that is online on our website from the last time. Like I said, the content might change. Most likely it will. And the way we organize and schedule things will probably be a bit different too, but we'll see. We'll see what seems like it might be most beneficial. We also had 2 long weekend retreats, 4-day retreats here at the Hermitage. And everything is available online as well, so you can do it all remotely. I think we recorded most things. I guess, no, we didn't record the meetings. I don't know, we'll see what we decide about it next year. So that's kind of the idea. And we didn't do it this year. We decided it's too much for us to take a group to Thailand and do the Upasika program in the same year. So we're considering alternating that. So this year we're going to take a group to Thailand. That group is already formed, and we'll be making that trip, and then getting the next Pasika program 2027 launched later this year. Another big difference between this coming year and the previous year is that we now do a full 3-month winter retreat, so it won't start until April. It'll start in April. It'll be a 9-month program, I guess, rather than a year long. Any questions or comments? Anybody want to check in? Yeah, James. Good to see you.
Hi, Ayya. Just as an aside, not why I raised my hand, but I would certainly recommend the Apostle program myself because I kind of failed dismally on it in some respects, but I found the regular teachings and particularly the way it was laid out and those different aspects very useful. So I recommend it. But for me, at least, the one of the problems with it is being 1,000 miles from anyone else who practices, so community was a problem. So there we go. But so thinking about death, it's like it's funny because I don't really remember a time in which I wasn't sort of aware of it, or that it wasn't sort of an aspect of life or something mysterious or anything. It's So I have no particular breakthrough moments when I realized it or the significance of it or anything. Maybe because I grew up with lots of pets. So once you've lost a load of goldfish, gerbils, hamsters, and all that stuff, it just becomes like another thing. And people aren't any different, really. But maybe it's also because I'm not sure that I've ever really lost someone that really, really counted. I'm sad to say, I've been to plenty of funerals, but no big ones. So maybe I'm lucky, maybe I'm not. I don't know because, yeah, you should avoid the pain, but you don't have the connections. But I think nowadays I'm just kind of like resigned to it. It's just, in fact, I was thinking about it the other morning on the way to work for some reason, that it kind of feels like it's just an aspect of existence, just natural, normal. This thing happens. So to be upset about death is just as kind of meaningless as being upset about the sun rising in the morning and setting at night. It just, I can understand that there's a lot more to it than that.
Mm.
But why be upset about something that's just inevitable? So that's like a lot of things in life. The so-called unsatisfactory aspects of life, you just sort of accept this is the way life is, and kind of accept it. Yeah, and alongside all the other things that don't work or don't seem right or could do with improvement, I guess. But I think for me, I feel like I've made some progress in that regard, and Dhamma certainly helps. But I just feel like I wonder whether maybe sometimes that something's not quite right though, because it's hard to put into words that I just feel kind of resigned to yeah, this is the way things are, and the result is kind of it's not a sadness. I think sometimes I've thought of it as disappointment almost, that the older you get, the more you realize life is just like this and it's not all cherries and roses. And you can accept that, but it's sort of, I don't know what I'm trying to say. It's sort of hard to feel that it's liberating. It's more like you're more like, oh, right, okay. That's the way life is it? apparently it sucks a lot more than I expected. Perhaps I don't know, but it's not. It doesn't feel like. I mean, like Dhamma's helping me a lot recently with sort of accepting the areas of my life that aren't perfect, which is a lot basically, and probably the same for most people, really. And that's great because for one thing, I'm not getting that sort of anxiety, fear, worries about it because I'm being more accepting. And the other thing is, I'm also not living in denial of these things. You know, I'm not pretend. I can no longer pretend that certain things are okay by distracting myself with all that other noise and jumble that you do if you're not being mindful and sort of practicing.
Mhm.
But similarly with death, the result has been more like just kind of a just sort of a resignedness to it, a kind of like, oh well, we'll just carry on then, I suppose. You know, like I say, it's not sadness, it's kind of disappointment, but it's not. I'm not even sure quite what I'm trying to say. Really, it's yeah. Oh, I don't know. I think I've been trying to ask about this for a while now, but I just can't quite pin it down. You know, it's like you become more aware of the disappointments in life, you accept it, you recognize that the things that you thought were great actually aren't. And then after that, what you're left with, but a kind of sort of an emptiness, really, an emptiness, and there's just nothing to rely on, nothing good exactly. It's just like you
Yeah,
get up in the morning, oh, it's another day, and you
yeah.
soldier through. But anyway,
Like
sorry, I'll stop rambling.
that's okay, James. Thank you. It's what I'm hearing. Let me know if I've got this. It's a kind of resignation that um, it sounds like peace, but I don't think it really is.
Mm. It's more like giving up, I think. The image that jumped to my mind, sorry, is that imagine you take an animal, you lock it in its in a cage, and maybe it fights for a while to try and get out, but eventually it realizes it's pointless, so it just sits there and does nothing. You know what I mean? It's just resigned. The
Yeah,
spirit is gone. Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's not
maybe.
liberation. It's not liberation. So
Mm.
I think I think what it calls for, what is possible is going deeper internally, going past the resignation, even though it's, it's understandable to recognize and see, like the Buddha said, the noble disciple thinks this isn't only happening to me, that this is a part of life. However, the Buddha is not recommending a kind of being resigned to it. I think what he's recommending is looking deeper internally, that we can experience the true peace of Nibbana that is happy. It's not just resigned, it's not sad, it's not neutral, it's happy and loving. And it's the the peace of having let go of everything. So when we're feeling resigned, I think we're still, in a sense, clinging. There's still that connection to the world that's disappointed. We're still in the cage. Whereas this is coming out of the cage, real freedom. So I think with that, what I'd like to encourage is looking deeper. And I think that it's mindfulness and it's reflection on what does it mean to really be happy and peaceful? What does it mean to let go of everything? That you even let go of the disappointment, let go of the expectations, let go of whatever we might be still clinging to. It requires being able to see what our views and opinions really are of life and let them go. And I think I think faith is a big part of it. To open the heart, to allow the Dhamma to work on the heart, to do its work, to reveal what's beyond that resignation, what's beyond that acceptance without the joy. And the spiritual joy of meditation is very helpful. And that letting go completely is happy. It's happiness in it. And recognizing that what arises from that is gratitude and renunciation. So those might be some things to reflect on. Because it's true, we have these mechanisms that help us deal with these situations that we can't avoid. And it might get us through it, but it doesn't necessarily lead to liberation.
That makes sense. Thank you, Ayya. I kind of thought that it's sort of more of a step on the way, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
But there's nothing within me that is pushing me towards quitting anytime soon. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll carry on. Thank you.
You're welcome. Sarah?
When you said what comes out of it is a gratitude, I expected that. But then you said renunciation. I was like, I didn't expect that. And I was wondering if you could just say more about that.
Yeah. What are we renouncing? It's all of the clinging, all of the things we're attached to. We're still simplifying, letting go. Because even when we realize completely the truth, then the personality is still there and the body is still there. We still practice renunciation. And renunciation isn't just like limiting our, eating and sleeping and entertainment and whatever. It's really letting go of things. It's really relinquishing whatever we're attached to, whatever our habit patterns have, been ingrained in us. Yeah. Because the renunciation brings freedom, continued freedom. You don't want to get mired in the habits of the personality. Ajahn Sumedho talks about this samuti, this conventional reality. And the paramata, such a ultimate reality. And he'll talk about how the samut self, I think the samut is probably the shortened version they use in Thailand. Samut self, has its reactions, like it wants. The latest one he said was that he was going to be giving the Dhamma talk. This is just like last week sometime. Going to be giving the Dhamma talk, and he always has a cup of very strong coffee before he goes to the Dhamma hall. It probably gets his 92-year-old system up and really like able to give that talk, right? So, and the electricity went out. So he said his samut self was like, I'm not going to get my coffee. Uh-oh. And he said his carers ingeniously found a way to make him the coffee anyway. But he said at the ultimate level, the Paramata self doesn't care. So like you can even let go entirely and see the truth completely, but then the habit patterns might still be there. Ajahn Mahabua said he never got over the fear of tigers. Well, the body is still afraid of tigers. The body reacts. So there's all that patterning. But when we know the truth, then you can look at it and you just like, but really I don't care. Doesn't matter. Because you know the truth. So there is that renunciation still happening. The relief too from it. So as always, I have great appreciation for your practice and really want to encourage you in continuing and learning for yourself, because that's essential, absolutely essential. So take good care.